Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of John Carter, the movie from Disney. This was the 2012 movie, and I actually had a request from a viewer to do this review. And first of all, thank you for that request. It's been probably about 10 years since I've seen this movie. And so when that happens, you're always like, well, was it as good as I remember? And the answer is, oh God, yes. It is absolutely as good as I remember it. And so I haven't done a review of this so far because I just thought everyone knew what a great movie this is, and I just wasn't sure what I could contribute to that conversation. But we're going to find out. I'm going to gush about this thing for however long this video lasts. So let's get going. So John Carter is far and away my favorite thing ever done with an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel on the big screen, but there have been some really good efforts in the past. I've already done reviews of the silent movies of Tarzan. Each one of those was actually a adaptation of a Tarzan novel, and most of them are fantastic. However, they are limited by the fact that they are silent. You know, the actors cannot speak, and they're black and white and have limited technology. And then in the 70s, we got fantastic adaptations of The Land That Time Forgot and At the Earth's Core. However, those were limited by the technology of the time. And so John Carter is really our first chance where the technology has really caught up with Burroughs' imagination. And so we can finally see an adaptation that fully realizes what was in the novel. However, the road to get us that movie has been a very long one. Like most pop culture concepts that have any type of following, John Carter has had attempts at making a movie of the concept for almost as long as that character has been around. And like most attempts at making movies, most of them fall through and never produced a movie. The first pitch for a John Carter movie was in 1931 for an animated movie, and of course that didn't happen. And then there were numerous pitches over the next so many decades for live action versions of John Carter. Unfortunately, the technology really wasn't there, and so of course none of those movies got made. The dubious honor of the first John Carter movie adaptation goes to 2009's A Princess of Mars, an unofficial adaptation starring Tracy Lords, which is about as good as you think it would be. If you ever get curious, it is available on Tubi to watch for free. But of course, the honor of doing the far superior official version of John Carter went to Andrew Stanton, a longtime fan of the novels who brought a lot of passion to bringing John Carter to the screen. He's best known for his work on animated movies like Finding Nemo and WALL-E, and this was his first live-action movie, but I think he did a fantastic job, and he was just a right man with the right resources to get this movie done. It had a fantastic script, beautiful special effects, haunting, iconic music that I still immediately recognize to this day, and a fantastic cast, including Lynn Collins, who plays Deja Torres, and she is actually on The Walking Dead right now in the final season as Daryl's ex-girlfriend. I didn't even recognize her, but it's pretty awesome to see Deja Torres on Walking Dead. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how important it was that they shot everything they possibly could on location, and that included shooting the Mars scenes in a place in Utah. And it's so Mars-like where they were shooting at that NASA actually has people camp out there to simulate what it would be like to go to Mars. And they also had all the actors who were playing Tharks on scene. They were actually walking around on stilts to simulate how tall Tharks were while actually acting and being there on the set, which I think is a big part of why this movie works so well. And so the movie adapts Edgar Rice Burroughs' first novel, which was originally serialized as Under the Moons of Mars, and when it was printed in novel form was called A Princess of Mars. And so it's the story of a veteran soldier named John Carter who inexplicably ends up on Mars, and he fights and befriends these four-armed aliens called Tharks. He rescues a princess named Deja Torres, and so John Carter and Deja Torres have kind of this will they, won't they thing. You know, it's kind of forbidden love. But of course, by the end of it, you get your happy ending. John Carter marries the princess and finds where he belongs on the planet of Mars. And so it is an extraordinarily influential story. This is the novel that inspired Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and Star Wars and James Cameron's Avatar and Superman. And Burroughs' work on the Mars novels would kind of be his template for his better known works on the Tarzan novels. So very, very influential work. This is kind of the granddaddy of all pop culture storytelling. So this movie is an adaptation. It's not a reimagining like you would see in a DC or Marvel movie, which pretty much just do completely new stories that don't really have a lot to do with the source material. And that's fine. I mean, it's not like they hate the source material. They're just loving it in a different way, right? But for my money, if the original story was good, an adaptation is the way to go. And this is a fantastic story. However, this is not a verbatim adaptation where you're trying to adapt it line for line like Sin City or Watchmen. And I deeply love both of those movies. But the issue they run into is they had to do a very abridged version of their source material. They had to cut a lot out in order to fit into a movie format. So I really have no problem retelling this story from the original source material with the same plot beats and the same characters, but just doing it in a way that fits into a movie. And I think that is exactly what John Carter, the movie, did very well. There were a lot of changes that were made that I felt worked very well. For instance, John Carter now has a tragic backstory that fleshes him out as a character and gives him a character arc. Dejah Thoris is probably the most changed. She's giving a much more prominent role in both the story and the action, which I think works quite well. The Therns are brought in from the second novel, and they lose the wigs and are kind of cranked up to 11, given this kind of epic threat to both Mars and possibly Earth, given this incredible alien technology to make them a more formidable force. And I am totally there for it. Therns are one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' greatest villains, and it's cool to see them played up like that. And there's all kinds of other changes. You know, Tharks are shorter, white apes are taller, Tars Tarkas starts out as a Jedak, but I think all of this stuff works quite well in the movie. But there's also so many loving touches from the novel that I never thought I would see on the big screen. They actually do the proper Martian greeting where they put their hands on each other's shoulders. There's Edgar Rice Burroughs as a character in there, just like in the novels. That's certainly something I never thought would have ever been in an Edgar Rice Burroughs movie. And they were even planning to bring him back and have him in the sequels. I mean, how amazing is that? Just a level of love that went into this movie is just incredible. And even though so many movies and comics and shows have been inspired by the Mars novels, there's still just something really unique that no one has managed to replicate in over 100 years about some of the stuff in there. There's something so cool about that first scene on Mars where he has to learn to walk again under the gravity there and discovers that he has superhuman strength and then he can leap tall buildings in a single bound. And even after all this time, no one has ever replicated the Tharks. I mean, they're just still unique and interesting and cool. And how cute were those baby Tharks? And there's still nothing like Woola, who is John Carter's hideous yet absolutely adorable pet companion. And many, many arena scenes have been done throughout the history of pop culture in the last century, but none still compare to the one from the first John Carter novel. And there's that incredibly dramatic scene where John Carter faces off against a horde of Warhoon in order to let Dejah Thoris and Sola escape. And in the movie, it creates probably one of the best action scenes I have ever seen on screen. And there's still something really interesting and unique about the way Burroughs wrote his alien civilizations. Unlike modern science fiction, where alien civilizations are almost always more advanced than us, and they have laser beams and starships and all that, Burroughs wrote his civilizations not to be more advanced, but differently advanced than Earth. And so, for instance, on Mars, their oceans dried up, so they made ships that would sail on the air. And so that creates a very unique world where we have flying ships, but also sword fights and shootouts with pistols on this dying planet. And there's just nothing quite like it in science fiction. So the only major part of the novel that is missing from this movie is the air factory, which produces the atmosphere of Mars, and then the cliffhanger, which of course is set at the air factory. I actually really think that was a good call, because as frustrating as it is for us to not have a sequel for it, imagine if there had been a cliffhanger where we weren't sure if everyone on Mars was alive or not. That would have been even more frustrating. So I'm totally fine with them leaving that out. And I got a feeling, considering the apocalyptic nature of the Therns in this movie, that most likely, if there had been sequels, the air factory would have been a factor in those. And so really my only criticism of the movie is that I wish the red Martians had red skin like they do in the novels. That's it. That's the only thing that bothers me about the movie. I could probably haggle a little bit over the costume and vehicle design. It's not my favorite for this sort of movie. However, I think it does pay tribute to a lot of different looks that Mars has had over the years in covers and such. And I think it looks perfectly fine for what it is. And I think it would have made for great, action figures and merchandise and Happy Meal toys and an animated series and all that, which unfortunately we, of course, never got. And that is because the movie, unfortunately, had what has been described as one of the worst marketing campaigns of all time, and thus a very expensive movie. Unfortunately, underperformed greatly at the box office. It did make $263 million. However, that was not enough to cover its budget, and it would have had to make like $700 million just to make a profit, which is kind of ridiculous. And there was a mystifying lack of licensing around John Carter. There was just no push, no effort to make people familiar with the character before the movie came out. All we had were comic books, and these were unlicensed from Dynamite. And of course, comic books are great, but they do reach a limited audience. Just about the only merchandise I'm aware of is that they did put out a 4-issue miniseries called John Carter World of Mars, which was the prequel to the movie, and that was published by Marvel Comics, and this was an official comic. They're good, but that was it. And so you get this absolutely bizarre situation where everything goes right as far as making a movie that is an absolute masterpiece, but then everything goes wrong as far as marketing and releasing that movie. And to make it even stranger, all they had to do was replicate the marketing and licensing campaign that they had done 2 years earlier with Tron Legacy, which was, by all accounts, a successful movie, at least financially. And of course that didn't happen, so it became what is known as a box office bomb because it lost Disney money. And unfortunately, that is the thing it is best known for in the general public. And that's unfortunate. It does mean that most likely we will never see a sequel to John Carter. But honestly, my main interest isn't in how much a movie makes, it's how much I enjoy it. I really don't understand, with as much as people talk about income inequality, how we are so obsessed with making millionaires richer off of these movies. I mean, think about it. Can you tell me how much any of these comic books around me cost to make, right? Can you tell me how much money they made? Can you tell me how much profit those companies made off putting out those comic books? Of course not, because we don't do this to any other form of storytelling other than movies. And whether a movie is a hit or not is based more around business decisions than audience reaction. A movie with a smaller budget can be a huge hit with only making $30 million, right? Meanwhile, movies that make, $250 million or more could be a flop, just depending on how much it costs to make and market the movie. I wish we could judge movies in how much enjoyment it gave the audience as opposed to how much profit it made for a movie studio. But unfortunately, that is just not the world we live in. And because of that, I really doubt we'll ever see another live action John Carter movie again. I could be wrong. I hope I am, but I doubt it. I think probably going forward, animation, that idea that they had back in 1931, is probably the best way forward. I think there are a lot of great streaming opportunities for a John Carter animated series. I would certainly like to see that happen. If you enjoyed John Carter the movie, I highly, highly recommend checking out all 10 of Edgar Rice Burroughs' original Mars novels, along with the new novel, John Carter, Gods of the Forgotten by Gary Grable, which I've done a review of. It is fantastic. Trendmasters actually put out several Mars figures as part of its Tarzan the Epic Adventures line, and you can hunt these down on eBay. There are also more expensive collectible 12-inch figures that have come out in more recent years if you want to pay like over $100 for a figure. And there's also a John Carter role-playing game that's come out in recent years. And you can get this cool John Carter of Mars shirt off of Amazon. And Dynamite is still doing John Carter comics. They've been going for about 12 years now, and they are officially licensed now. And that's about it for all the John Carter merchandise that I can think of. Of course, none of it had anything to do with the movie, but it does exist. It has come out in the last few decades. It is surprising there's not more for a character that's been around over 100 years, but hopefully that'll change. I think, between the comics and the movies, I think a lot of us have become acquainted with John Carter over the last 10 years or so, and I think there's quite an appetite for merchandise and toys and all that stuff, and hopefully we'll be seeing that in the future. All right, guys, like and subscribe for more videos, and until next time, see ya.